Before I begin discussing this part, we need to draw a line between two often related, but not necessarily always applicable concepts. One is looking at why a work failed, the other is why a work is flawed. Transformers Revenge of the Fallen is a great example of how they're not always the same. That film is deeply flawed, but it didn't fail. $836 million is by any measure a success. And if you watch the intro video, you know that despite being flawed, Pearl Harbor was a success. Not a great success, but it was the sixth highest grossing film of the year. And putting it and Treasure Planet side by side, you can see how clear that point is. Pearl Harbor, hugely hyped, big reputation, visually exciting spectacle, released during one of the biggest movie weekends of the year, but with no fresh competition. Treasure Planet, barely advertised, Disney reputation, lacking big visual spectacles, released during a crowded Thanksgiving weekend. No surprise that despite Pearl Harbor being terrible and Treasure Planet not, that it was the latter that failed. Again, failure does not mean flawed. Let's start with one I said that might have made lovers of the film bristle, lacking big visual spectacles. That is not to say the film is not a visual achievement. I've gone on about the visual achievements of the film. There is a difference, though, between big spectacle and technically impressive sweeping visuals. Think for a moment about a spicy buffalo wing. As soon as you take a bite, your mouth is filled with a powerful burst of flavor. Hot, spicy, tangy, a little bit sweet. It's bold, it's exciting. It leaves a powerful impression upon you. Now compare this to coq au vin, a dish that requires a careful balance of flavors and expert techniques to prepare it correctly. Its taste is not immediate and overpowering like a buffalo wing. But there's a great deal of subtlety and complexity to appreciate. The flavors of the chicken, wine, herbs, and vegetables all meld together into something that's more than the sum of its parts to produce a deeply enriching dining experience. So it's not an insult or even damning with faint praise to say that by and large Treasure Planet lacks big spectacle. It's to recognize that it aims more towards a nuanced feast for the eyes rather than razzmatazz. Pearl Harbor versus Treasure Planet shows the difference between style and substance. So to acknowledge this is not to point to a flaw, but it does show a likely failure point. While the technique has evolved, you can go back to, well, what immediately springs to mind is the A Whole New World scene from Aladdin. Yes, by technical metrics, the animation of Treasure Planet is superior. Yet as an experience, the Aladdin scene is the one that I personally prefer over the musical number of Treasure Planet. And I'm not even saying I didn't like that scene. It was one of, if not the best parts of that film. And interestingly, if you watch the trailer, you know that they took the song from that scene and played it over every instance of spectacle that they could find in the movie. Treasure Planet's beauty is in its subtlety, which is what was delicious about the Aladdin scene. Both are taking you along for the ride. So how do you convey that? What's more, how does that play to your target audience? Because those similarities speak to kind of the issue here. The fact of the matter is that the target audience is going to see that Aladdin-like thing and think, Aladdin, a movie I liked when I was little, but not now. I brought up Shrek last time because it serves as a snapshot of the period. By every metric, Shrek was a success. Critically, financially, with audiences, with awards, and standing the test of time. This, whatever you might think of either film, was what audiences in general, and the target audience of Treasure Planet in particular, was looking for. Treasure Planet, for all its impressive advancement, still looked like a Disney movie. And if any kid did go and see that, what aspect of it would drive its target audience to then use word of mouth to boost it in order to make up for the non-existent marketing? To further illustrate the situation, let's pivot to earlier in the year that Treasure Planet came out to perhaps put this in a bit more context. we're going to talk about the second most popular animated film of that year. Do you know who made it? Disney. What was it about? Mixing science fiction with a contemporary setting. What about the main human character? It's a troubled child. These aspects of Treasure Planet, which are often seen as being weak points, are baked into Lilo and Stitch. But Lilo and Stitch was aimed for a market that made Shrek a success. Some say that Treasure Planet was ahead of its time, but honestly, I think it would have done a lot better if they would have done it in place of Hercules like they had wanted, because Treasure Planet feels like it comes from that era. It feels like that kind of a Disney movie, even if it doesn't have the musical numbers. While Lilo and Stitch, even though it has Alan Silvestri still working on the soundtrack, feels very 21st century. And again, I can't emphasize this point enough. A failure point doesn't mean it's a flaw. John Carpenter's The Thing gave us scary, disgusting aliens when everybody wanted E.T. That's a failure point, but definitely not a flaw. As we get back to the movie, you can perhaps see what I mean when I spoke of spectacle earlier. This scene isn't spectacle, but it is a visual feast all the same. Spectacle doesn't mean explosions or things like that, but this kind of quiet beauty is very different from spectacle. Well, all too quickly, Captain No Fun tells Silver to keep his flim-flam flattery to himself and drag Jim off to get some working done. So while Jim gets to mopping and... making friends, he watches some plotting amongst the sailors. That is not welcome. Oh man, we are going to need a really big vacuum for that spider. He starts roughing Jim up, but Silver intervenes, and Mr. Arrow says he better keep his abdomen in line. Silver agrees readily with this sentiment, and in fact, goes down to see the crew personally to make clear his displeasure. Mutiny, he insists, is like fine wine. No mutiny before it's time. Got it, Charlotte? So, having sorted out the crew, Silver goes to check up on the little pain, only to be surprised that the kid thanks him for stepping in and saving Jim from that ass-whooping. Seems he wasn't expecting such vulnerability from the kid, and learning that Jim's father went out for a pack of space cigarettes and never came back, Silver says he's going to step in and whip this kid into shape, no matter how many lashings it's going to take. This is the musical part of the film, the montage of Silver teaching Jim how to do things, most of them hard work, intercut with the neglect of Jim's own father. It shows Silver making a man out of him by not coddling him, but also being capable of kindness and even pride in what Jim is accomplishing. The relationship between Silver and Jim is undeniably the strongest element of this film. Razzle-dazzle is all well and good, but in the end, stories are about people, and seeing Jim's face as Silver rides away in the skiff, triggering the memory of the day that his father left him, only for Silver to gesture for Jim to join him, shows how much coming back really meant to Jim. The scene of those two riding a skiff into a comet is, visually, all right. But in context, it's everything. It is to see two people with a bond enjoying the pleasures life has to offer, taking one small moment in between their hard work to share a little adventure. There's a quiet moment after it's all over where Jim noncommittally mentions that he's got things planned that will change his future. And Silver seems to feel bad that he knows he's going to hurt the kid taking that treasure that he's alluding to. But when Silver explains, after Jim asked how he lost his arm and leg, that it happens when you chase a dream, we see that no price is too great to gain the treasure, even if it means breaking Jim's heart. And mine! Well, wouldn't you know it, trying to have a moment here, and the nearby star goes supernova. Clearly, it's too late to save Romulus now. Well, this requires action, starting with tying the lifelines on themselves, and then taking down the sails before they're taken out by stellar fragments. It's pretty nasty. Silver's line gets snapped, and it's only thanks to Jim that he's not lost. But the fragment that nearly kills them doesn't, on account of the star has collapsed into a black hole, so naturally it's just sucking everything in now. Like I said, it's science fantasy, or watching people use solar sails when there are no stars. It's probably the least egregious of them all. Anyway, during the attempt to escape, Mr. Arrow is pulled overboard, and Mr. Spider cuts the rope to send him to his doom. Well, that's sad news for him, but thanks to Delbert's knowledge of astrophysics and Captain Amelia's piloting, everyone else gets saved. The ship rides the wave away. But then that sneaky little bastard comes back, claiming that Mr. Arrow was lost not because he's been murdered, but because Jack didn't secure his lifeline. Where's a gigantic tissue when you need one? Jim beats himself up over this, while Silver knows that it wasn't his fault. So when he sees that Jim has completely lost faith in himself...
You got the makings of greatness in you, but you gotta take the helm and chart your own course. Stick to it, no matter the squalls.
Trust me, I've lost half me limbs. Clearly, I'm a master of making good decisions. Like I said, this relationship is the centerpiece of all that is good in this film.
And when the time comes, you get the chance to really test the cut of your sails and show what you're made of. Well, I hope I'm there, catching some of the light coming off you that day.
Well, Silver may have taken a shine to Jim, but like I said, he's not giving up that treasure. So after playing with Morph, Jim winds up in a barrel of purple space lemons or something, and so overhears the plotting. When the Spider Dude suggests that Silver's gone soft, especially with Jim, well, Silver knows that he's in serious trouble. He doesn't want the first mutiny to be against him. So, he acts like everything he was doing with Jim was just to make sure that he was blissfully unaware of the coming betrayal. Jim is naturally heartbroken over this, but everyone else is excited because they've finally spotted Treasure Planet and rush out, which soon means that only Silver and Jim are down there. And Silver realizes that Jim knows what's up. Well, as established, this is a man who literally paid an arm and a leg for this treasure, so nothing is going to stand in his way.